We've got breaking news. Secret Service Director resigns following the disastrous congressional hearing.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow. This is Logan Sekulow. Joining us also Will Haynes, executive producer in studio. Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem is going to be joining us a bit later. And of course, we're going to be taking your phone calls at 1-800-684-3110 if you're joining us on all your favorite social media platforms or streamers like YouTube or Rumble. Welcome. We have got a packed show. And of course, the breaking news out is that the Secret Service Director, after the completely disastrous hearing yesterday where essentially she could answer no questions, of course, spends the day now resigning. Of course, that also comes from the breaking news that Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, has all but, or really has, secured the nomination for president. So subverting democracy a little bit there to become your new candidate for the Democrats. So we're going to break all that down coming up again at 1-800-684-3110. But Will, why don't you give us a little update on this Secret Service news?
That's right. So after the hearing yesterday, we saw something extremely rare out of this Congress, and that was a bipartisan letter from the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, signed by both the chairman, James Comer, and the ranking member, Jamie Raskin, two individuals in Congress that rarely agree on anything, but they sent this joint letter to the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, and it said, on July 13th, the United States Secret Service, under your leadership, failed to protect former President Donald Trump from assassination attempt. And they go on to say, today, you failed to provide answers to basic questions regarding that stunning operational failure and to reassure the American people that the Secret Service has learned its lessons and begun to correct its systemic blunders and failures. We call on you to resign as director as a first step to allowing new leadership to swiftly address this crisis and rebuild trust of a truly concerned Congress and the American people. Now, that was kind of the sign that she won't last the week, that there was bipartisan outcry. You saw that within the hearing. There were a few members on the Democrat side that went rogue and made it about other issues, but the vast majority of congressional members in that hearing were very genuinely upset at the failures. And then this morning, we see that she tenured her resignation to the Secret Service.
Yeah, there was an email that went out to her staff that said, I take full responsibility for the security lapse. In light of recent events, with a heavy heart, I made the difficult decision to step down as your director. Again, that comes off of the heels of now a Vice President Kamala Harris now being the party nominee, and an influx of money, an influx of celebrity endorsements. And look, we're going to break that down also in the conversations of what's happening with Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, visiting the United States right now and being snubbed by Vice President Harris and a lot of the Democrats. And what does that mean for Israel looking forward? I think there's a lot of talk. I'm on social media a lot, they're watching what people are saying, and there's a lot of, I would say, cheap shots happening right now at Kamala Harris. Things that are either offensive or are just belittling, really have nothing to do with the record, just have to do with some personal issues, or even if you think she speaks funny, and she has a funny way of speaking, which, by the way, she does. But let's talk about other people that do, okay? Pretty much every president. That's why Saturday Night Live has been able to do this for so many years. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, certainly. I mean, these are interesting people who speak very bizarrely and sometimes uncomfortably. But here's the deal. How about we really focus on the horrible record that she has in terms of life, in terms of Israel, in terms of a lot of these big ticket topics that we focus on here at the ACLJ. There is enough there without going low into some personal, feeling. That is not going to win you an election. What's going to win you an election is actually showing that this person should not be the president because of what they have done and what they have said and what their record shows. Stick to that. Right now, though, we are heading towards the last week of our Life and Liberty Drive for the month of July. We need you right now. We have seen the aggressive attacks. We have filed still, by the way, just because the Secret Service Director goes away doesn't mean this case is closed. We filed a FOIA request to the Biden-Harris Secret Service and the DHS to get answers on the security breakdown in the assassination attempt. We can't do this kind of legal work without you. Right now, all donations are doubled. So go to aclj.org right now. We'll be back in just a moment.
We just got word that the Secret Service Director, Kim Cheatle, has resigned.
An internal email sent by Kim Cheatle to those in the Secret Service announces her resignation. This a day after that she was really a verbal punching bag on Capitol Hill.
Director Cheatle has tendered her resignation. Of course, that comes one day after she faced a grilling in front of House lawmakers who demanded answers about the security lapses that led to the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th. Of course, they were frustrated when Cheatle really refused to give any sort of detail about what their investigation so far has turned up as far as the U.S. Secret Service's role in those security lapses.
I'm glad she's resigning. I'm glad she's no longer going to be the head of the Secret Service. I wish she had been fired because, I mean, we need to change the culture of that organization. There were so many. This was a catastrophic failure to protect the former president and, quite frankly, also the leading candidate to be the next president. And she had the most abysmal performance that I'd ever seen. And not just my 4 years in Congress, but the most abysmal performance I've ever seen in front of a congressional committee in the 30 years since I've been a nerd watching C-SPAN in my 20s.
During yesterday's hearing, one of the members, the Republican members of the committee, actually offered to give up her time during the hearing to have Director Cheatle write her resignation letter, and she politely declined. And at one point, she did say that she still believed that she was the best person for the job during that hearing. But you're right, a bipartisan letter from Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat, and Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, really tipping the balance here. That bipartisan call for her to step down was really, the writing was on the wall after that.
Both Republicans and Democrats come out so quickly and do it in a bipartisan way. They're trying not to make this a political issue, even though politics are involved in the people that are being protected. And it seems as though it just became too much for the director to handle. And at this point, she's made the decision that it's time to step down.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Hey, phone lines are open right now. I'd like to hear from you. When you hear news that the Secret Service Director has resigned, how does it make you feel? There's actually some bipartisan movement. And, of course, that had to come with an assassination attempt on President Trump. Give us a call at 1-800-684-3110. Another breaking news item is that President Joe Biden, will address the nation tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's going to happen tomorrow, presumably from the White House. Is that the thought process as of now?
They are saying that President Biden is expected to travel back to D.C. after being in Delaware over the weekend where he was recovering from his COVID diagnosis, that he will be traveling back today and preparing to deliver that address tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have another large address tomorrow, and that's from Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who will be addressing Congress at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are seeing many Democrats that are boycotting that address. Kamala Harris is not going to preside over the Senate as the president of the Senate, which is her official duty as vice president. For that address, she will be attending a campaign event in Indianapolis, so snubbing the prime minister there. And they are saying that she's planning on trying to meet with the prime minister later in the week, possibly Thursday. We'll see how that all pans out, if that's just maybe giving a little bit of service to the prime minister since he came all this way. But it is glaring that they are not going to be there in the room for the address to Congress.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, because we'll be joined by Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem coming up in just a few segments. So I would love him to have your feedback as well when you know they are snubbing Benjamin Netanyahu and they are making a specific, really, boycott of his time in America. He said didn't send anybody to show up and greet him at the airport. These are the kind of things that normally happens for dignitaries and such that come over and do these official visits. But no, they are doing this, making a statement for Israel. That's what I'm talking about. When you're talking about a potential Harris administration. And look, we'll know, by the way, we'll know, but next week.
That's right. Who
the vice presidential pick will be for her. I've given you my thoughts. I think there's a lot of rumblings. There's a lot of talk. Certainly vetting is happening right now. So we'll see who that ends up being. But I'd love to hear from you. When you know this record can be, again, run on this record. Her record and her statements are enough. It should be enough that if you're a supporter of the ACLJ, if you're a supporter of this broadcast, you don't need to go low on this. I'm reading X or on Instagram, and it's all, I know a lot of it's done in joking and jest, but it's so the wrong way to go personally. because you have a treasure trove of context, of content that she has provided, making statements, being the most probably pro-abortion president would be in our lifetime, being, again, snubbing Benjamin Netanyahu in their support of Israel. So you would have two very big issues here. You would have a lot of issues. You would have a great deal of concern. So my encouragement to you, if you feel like she's not the right pick, and a lot of people are going to feel like she is the right pick, is not to go low, because there's no reason to. You do that when you got nothing else to say. But when you have a vice president and someone who has been in public service for quite a long time now, there's a lot you can pick apart.
Well, that's right. And if you look at even her voting record in the Senate, organizations do voting scorecards. They take your record of votes, and based on how you voted on certain bills that have hot button issues and topics, they can kind of rate you, whereas like the furthest right in the Senate and the furthest left. And she ranked further to the left in her voting record in the Senate than Bernie Sanders. Yeah. So that's not something that you're hearing talked about by people that are going out on social media or other places, and they're really just making personal attacks, which are fair game, I guess. But is that really the right tactic if you're seeing someone running for president? Are you really going to win, if that's your goal, on personal attacks? That's kind of what has been criticized of many candidates before, is that you only went personal, you didn't get to the substance of it. And I think that there is plenty to look at and dig into, like you said.
A lot of candidates, you don't have as big of a record. She has a pretty strong record of where she's going to go.
Right.
And what she's going to bring into a presidency. And, again, going after just the way someone speaks. And I felt that way about Biden as well. Or any of these presidents. George W. Bush. You go after, he says some funny words here and there. Well, he had a pretty strong record one way or the other, whether you agree with him or disagree with him. You could probably kind of anticipate where his presidency was going to go. But instead, you take the low road. You decide, let's just focus on the fact that he kind of stumbles over his words. And guess what happens? You had 8 years of President George W. Bush. And here's what you can have, is you go that way, and then you have 8 years of Kamala Harris. After 4 years, you have that incumbency, because she obviously has not been the president before. Now, I do have a question. It's something we should bring up. I'm not even sure the answer to this. If Joe Biden steps down this week, which, by the way, I'm not saying he will, but if I was a betting man, I think that you could have that happen. I think you have a very good chance that she becomes president before the election. I just think that's highly likely. I think that clearly there is something going on. We're not being shown everything right now. Whether you believe it's some sort of crazy conspiracy or not, I don't think it is. I think it is just, it would make more sense. It would be a stronger incumbency for her to have those few months to become the president, show she can lead to a large percentage of people, as we saw the polls today, have a neck and neck with her and Donald Trump in terms of just the overall. But what we really saw was this was from a Quinnipiac poll, that there was a massive gap in terms of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the younger demographic pattern.
That's right. So the Quinnipiac poll, which was started actually the day before President Biden resigned, it was on the 19th, but a lot of people had been, and by resigned from the ticket, not from the presidency, but a lot of people had already started doing these polls if there was a possible replacement. And we see that President Trump in the overall number led Vice President Harris 49 to 47 with a 2.8% margin of error. So essentially a statistical tie with the edge to President Trump. But when you dig into the analytics and the details of the poll, when you look at the 18 to 34 age demographic, so the younger voters, some of these people are able to vote for the first time into, in the middle of your career, but that's kind of the youngest age demographic that they'll look at. You see that Harris is losing by 19 points in that age demographic. It's 58 to 39.
That's gigantic.
I mean, that's way outside the margin of error. That's not the voting demographic that typically you expect to break in an extreme number for a Republican candidate, but you're seeing that here in this poll. Obviously, you have to caution these polls are very early. A lot of this data was before he even announced that he was not seeking re-election.
Some of it was, though.
Some of it was because it went through the 21st, but you do have to take that with a grain of salt. But it is that's probably a very troubling number for the people in the campaign that are starting to analyze data.
And that is why I think you push her to become the president. She can serve 2 full elected terms. So you'd have 2 terms plus 6 months, is what we're being told. Here's the deal. I truthfully believe, and I know you're going to go, this is wild, because you're the people who watch and listen to this broadcast. You are not who I'm talking about. I believe there is a large percentage of that demographic, of that age demographic, that does not know who the vice president of the United States is. So the name Kamala Harris doesn't mean anything to them. The name Donald Trump does. Donald Trump, celebrity. Donald Trump, the president. Donald Trump, probably the most controversial president of our lifetime. So yes, they know the name Donald Trump, so they'll go Donald Trump. So you actually have to do so. That's why when people have said who's going to be the vice president, they keep throwing out even like a Shapiro, which, look, I could be totally wrong. I think she has to go with someone with some name value.
Right.
That people are familiar with, because you don't have the lead time to get used to the person. You know, there's not this. I mean, J.D. Vance, I think, is one of them. J.D. Vance, most people who are running in that circle know who he is. He's had a very successful career, whether it was his book or whatever. He had brand awareness. I don't think a Shapiro does. That's why I think you're either going to go with a Pete Buttigieg or you're going to go with the astronaut Kelly, because
Kelly, right.
That is a brand name that we all know. I really think they need it, because I don't know if Harris is carrying the weight that they think. I think you'd be shocked if you went to any city in in the country, interviewing people on the street and asked them who's the vice president of the United States. There's a large percentage that are not going to know, that are not engaged in politics the way you are. So I think that poll may be reflective of that, which is brand awareness.
Goes to your point as well of if the president were to resign before the end of his term, gives Kamala Harris the ability to then be the president, and that's earned media that you can't buy if you're running for president.
Yep. All right, hey, phone lines are open at 1-800-684-3110. Again, Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem is going to be joining us later, but I want to take this minute and just encourage you. We are headed towards the end of our July matching drive, our Life and Liberty Drive. All donations are doubled right now. You've heard what we're talking about. Look, the Biden administration has been really tough for all the issues that we hold value to. A Harris administration would likely be worse. Let's just be honest. Okay, at least Joe Biden had some moderate tendencies, even if he was being controlled by the far left. There's no need to be controlled in this administration if this was to happen, and we're going to need your support now more than ever. We only have 1 week left, and your crucial support for us to engage in these vital legal cases and in the media is right now. Go to aclj.org. Look, the news has taken over, so we're a little behind right now in our Life and Liberty Drive. We could use you today. Do it right now. Your donations are effectively doubled. Again, aclj.org, or scan the code on your screen.
Overnight, a major boost for Kamala Harris on her first full day in the race. The vice president securing the support of the more than 1,976 delegates she would need to win the Democratic nomination.
Delegates from her home state of California sending her over the top. Harris then saying overnight, "I look forward to formally accepting the nomination soon."
More than $100 million raised since the president's surprise announcement Sunday. More than 58,000 new volunteers. And she's keeping the team together, asking top aides like campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon to stay on, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer to co-chair the campaign.
Vice President Harris has my full support.
Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying she has full confidence Harris will lead Democrats to victory.
For now, the top 2 Democrats in Congress, Senator Chuck Schumer and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, withholding their support, waiting to meet with Harris first, but leaving little doubt.
Vice President Kamala Harris has excited the community. She's excited the House Democratic Caucus, and she's exciting the country.
The vice president definitely has tremendous momentum. She's been working the phones, doing all that's necessary in order to secure this nomination.
Harris now kicking off her campaign and rallying her troops. Harris visiting what was the Biden campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, now ground zero for her campaign for president. Biden himself calling into the meeting while home recovering from COVID. Biden passing the baton to his loyal VP.
Today, the vice president heads to Milwaukee for a previously scheduled campaign appearance that now takes on a whole lot more importance because it's our first sense of how she'll be as the candidate on the trail.
Another sign that the Harris team thinks they have this locked up. They have now tapped Eric Holder, the former attorney general under President Obama. He and his law firm will now be leading the vetting process for her running mate.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We got a lot of phone calls coming in. We got one line open still at 1-800-684-3110. Let's go to Gray, who is calling in North Carolina. Let's just take a call off the top. Gray, watching on Rumble, our favorite free speech platform. Gray, you're on the air.
I love it. Anyway, thanks for all you do. I am a champion, a very small one, but I am a champion.
Hey.
You know, I don't understand how any of the Jewish people can support the Democrat Party anymore because they are very anti-Semitic.
Like, Gray, I think that has been a common conversation amongst the Jewish community, which is, you have your more orthodox, your more religious Jewish community that do lean more right. That's just been the tradition. The more liberal Jewish community, look, a lot of them have come out against what's going on in Israel, including with Bibi Netanyahu. That's not everybody. But I don't disagree with you. It feels, ridiculous that they would. But it's also tradition. It's like when they talk about the Jewish vote, they talk about the black vote, they talk about the Hispanic vote. All of these are always just assumed to be Democrat. It is somewhat geographical, but I don't disagree with you, Gray, and I think that we need to educate. It's why we have ACLJ Jerusalem. It's why we come on here and talk to not only just the Christian community, but the Jewish community, the Zionist community, and talk about why there's an importance to support Israel, but I don't disagree with you. And look, I want to say you're an ACLJ champion. I want to say thank you. And again, ACLJ champions are those people like Gray who give on a monthly recurring basis. It's automatically recurring. And he said very small. That is not the point. The ACLJ is built on the backbone of individual donors. There's no big corporate sponsors. There's no big grants. That's not how this works here. I mean, there are people who do that. Fantastic. And there's people, by the way, that give big gifts to the ACLJ. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but the core is individuals who give $10 a month, $20, $50. So I think our average donation is somewhere between $45, $75. This is not like a lot of other organizations. We are truly built based on you. When I say we are looking for a base, that base number is because you decided to become an ACLJ champion. So we can estimate, hey, 21,000 of you have decided to do that, or whatever the number may be. And we could use that. Like I always say, I wish I could spin the camera around because you'd see a dozen people working on this show right now. You would see so many people out in our studio spaces working on all the content that we have coming up later. Maybe you'd go up and see our legal team that's here, our legal team in Washington, D.C., our legal team around the world. None of that is cheap. None of that is done for free, but it's all built on the backbone of ACLJ supporters. And this is the Life and Liberty Drive. And I wanted to thank each and every one of you, including Gray, who called in, said ACLJ champion. By the way, if you're an ACLJ champion, I always say, tell the phone screener when you call in, because I'll give you preferential treatment. Sorry, non-champions. It's okay.
Well, I did want to bring up something that Gray was talking about, is that now that Vice President Harris has secured enough delegate pledges to become the nominee, they will do that roll call vote virtually starting next week ahead of their convention to try to lock that down quickly. But people talk about how disastrous the Biden administration has been for Israel. We've talked about it with Jeff Balaban, how the people of Israel have felt betrayed by the Biden administration. And the headlines that come out about Kamala Harris, one, she was further left than Bernie Sanders when she was in the Senate, so you can just assume where she would go. But her record is it is definitely to the left of Joe Biden, which has done such a poor job supporting our ally. So here's a headline from Jewish Insider. Kamala Harris's record on Israel is to the left of President Biden. She has largely echoed the president's view on Israel because she is the vice president, right, but sounded much more sympathetic to note the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza, as well as this one from Haaretz, which says, Kamala Harris's record on Israel now under closer scrutiny after Biden's endorsement. VP Harris, who has been widely viewed as the Biden administration's so-called bad cop on Israel in recent months, received Biden's endorsement shortly after he announced he wouldn't seek re-election. So right now we're in this holding pattern, and obviously Joe Biden is still the president as of right now, so his policy will still be the one that carries the day, allegedly. But what you have to look at is how she will take many of these issues that the Biden administration has already done so poorly on. And we know that she's keeping around the campaign director. We know that many of the advisors that were already in place at the Biden-Harris campaign, she's keeping around. Same staffers. You can assume that a lot of that will carry over into a Harris administration. Yeah. How much worse will it be for our ally Israel, or the issue of life and things like that under a Harris administration?
Yeah, there's a call coming in. Kevin, who's listening on the radio in Indiana, on line 1. Let's go to Kevin. It's kind of related. Also, we're just being told that we're about to actually see the first appearance of President Biden since isolation with COVID. We'll let you know how that goes. Coming up on just a moment. So line 1, Kevin, you're on the air.
Yes, I was just wondering your opinion. Do you think the Democrats just nominated Kamala so they could keep all the fundraising money?
I think that that's it was the easiest path with the financial situation. Now, I always said I thought there was a way that they could have figured that out. It does feel very orchestrated. It does feel very planned now that we've seen the influx of money that's come in. We've seen all of your majors, except for the Obamas, come out and fully support Kamala Harris. And you saw her really secure the nomination within, 40 hours?
Right. Well, and you have to also look at, yes, I think, Kevin, there is something to that because of the war chest that the Harris campaign had already built up when it was the Biden-Harris campaign. Under FEC rules, so not just Democrat Party rules, there would have been a bigger hurdle to get to those funds. Jordan talked about it yesterday, it becoming soft money, which would have to go to outside groups, super PACs and things like that, not directly to a campaign where they could use their own strategy. But then you also look at, and it is curious that the Harris, once she had received all these endorsements, had received the delegate count, she had record-breaking fundraising hauls. This is the same person who didn't even make it to Iowa when she ran for president. They're creating a imagery that there is so much enthusiasm behind her, getting $81 million the first day after the announcement that President Biden was stepping aside, and having these literally record-breaking fundraising hauls. That comes from all those donors that were holding back their donations when Biden was still at the top of the ticket because they were concerned about him losing. All of a sudden the floodgates open, and it creates this imagery of record breaking when they had such little fundraising in the previous months that it was just a natural occurrence. And I think that also played into it, is that they could orchestrate this visual moment for everyone of enthusiasm, which may not actually be the case, but it's hard to argue when you're setting records of fundraising.
That's right. Hey, phone lines are open. We do a second half hour of the broadcast coming up. I know some of you still listen on terrestrial radio, and for some of those networks, they don't carry the full hour, which, number one, why would they do that? Number two, it's available live every day, noon to 1 Eastern. You can find us broadcasting live on ACLJ.org, on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, on X, wherever you get your social media, wherever you get your free streaming outlet. We're typically there broadcasting live. So make sure you join us live each and every day if you can. If not, you can pick it up later on the podcast feed. You can pick it up later on YouTube, on Rumble, and, of course, on ACLJ.org. But we do have a second half hour coming up. This is the shortest break. It is legitimately 1 minute between this segment and the next. We have two lines open at 1-800-684-3110. We do lose you here. I encourage you, support the work right now of the ACLJ. We can't do this without you. During our Life and Liberty Drive, every gift will be doubled. We are taking on this Biden-Harris administration head on in support of the causes that you hold dear. I'm going to go through some of those coming up in the next segment. And then Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem is going to be joining us in just a moment. But scan that QR code on your screen or go to ACLJ.org right now. Have your donation doubled through the month of July, but do it today at ACLJ.org.
Last summer, we launched our first ever ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. We never could have imagined how much you, our ACLJ members and ACLJ champions, would exceed our expectations, and we can't thank you enough. We'd love to tell you that 1 year later, threats to life and liberty are no more. Sadly, the radical left is relentlessly doing everything it can to destroy the very foundations of this great nation: life, religious liberty, and the Constitution. The good news is your ACLJ team has not slowed down. We continue to fight in courtrooms across the country, including the Supreme Court, to defend your freedoms and to save innocent babies. And we're proud to announce the return of the ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. Right now, your tax-deductible gift will be doubled, dollar for dollar, doubling your impact to defend your freedoms and help save innocent lives. Go to aclj.org right now and join us in this fight.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
This is Logan Sekulow. Will Haynes joining us as well. Executive producer Jeff Balaban's going to be joining us in the next segment. But right now, we are talking about a couple things. One, the Secret Service director, which we all kind of anticipated somewhat. Kimberly Cheatle resigned this morning, saying essentially, I take full responsibility. I'm out after a disastrous meeting. So if you are seeing that as the headline, we have been discussing that. But also mainly we're talking about, of course, is that Kamala Harris has, number one, secured the nomination. It happened. Number two, is essentially boycotting meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu or anyone affiliated with Israel. Maybe later on she'll meet with him, but she's not going to be proceeding over the speech that he'll be giving. So there's a lot of calls coming in about that. I think we should take that because the next segment we're going to have on Jeff Balaban from ACLJ Jerusalem. So let's go ahead and take some of these calls. Brenna is calling California. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment. I've been a supporter for a lot of years, and I thank you for all you're doing. It's unbelievable to me that Kamala Harris is not going to meet Benjamin Netanyahu. Is there nobody that's going to go meet him? That's just horrible.
And I want to clarify, because, look, there's still a chance that a meeting occurs, and I think there's even conversations that a meeting could occur. But the big moment is being boycotted by a lot of Democrats, and she's along with them.
That's right. They are reporting that she plans to have a private meeting probably on Thursday with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But the imagery of her being there for the speech to the joint session of Congress, presiding as the president of the Senate for that, it would be a strong moment in a normal world, not the bizarro world we're kind of living in, to be seen as almost presidential in that moment of accepting a world leader, being seen there as he speaks before a joint session of Congress. Instead, she's going to a fundraising event in Indianapolis. And I think there is a little bit of chaos, I'm sure, at the campaign, trying to figure out what's going on. So you can maybe give a little bit of a hesitation there that they got to figure out how to raise money. They got to do all this because now she's at the top of the ticket. I think it's a huge mistake. I think it is definitely playing to the worst elements of your party by not being there for it, and also trying to have your cake and eat it too by saying, well, I'll meet with him on Thursday in private. I just don't want to be seen publicly there at the joint session of Congress. I think that these headlines that say she's to the left of President Biden on the record of Israel, she was the bad cop on Israel within the administration, I think those are all probably accurate and fair, and that's the problem. Is that she's trying to have her cake and eat it too by saying, I'm not going to go because a lot of the congressional Democrats are boycotting. I'm not going to be a leader in this moment and show up. I'm going to go to a fundraising event for my new presidential campaign, but I'll still meet with him because that's the leadership thing to do.
I saw a comment that just came in on YouTube that said, not meeting is saying you don't want peace. In some ways, you can maybe make that argument, saying you actually are not doing anything to progress. If it's saying that you think the war needs to be over, ceasefire, all those things that Democrats and the liberals are saying right now and the protesters are saying, you're essentially saying you don't care by not having that meeting because you think if that was really your goal, you'd go ahead and meet with them. That's why, President Trump took a lot of flack. He even brought that up in his speech at the RNC. They took flack with meeting with a lot of people like Kim Jong-un and a lot of these kind of world dictators, horrible people. But having an interesting relationship with them because he was trying to stop maybe humanitarian crises that were happening around the world. So maybe, if you're Kamala Harris, you want to make that happen. Give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. We're going to take all those calls that come in, either in the next segment or then the one after that. We always take all the calls we can. So get in line. The next segment, Jeff Balaban's going to be joining us. We're going to discuss the Israel situation in depth and what it means for Netanyahu, what it means in the whole war that's happening right now. It's easy to forget that it's happening because it isn't number one on our on our news anymore, and understandably, we've had a heck of a 2 weeks here in our own country. So understandably, when you have a president essentially stepping aside, when you have another presidential candidate, former president, with an assassination attempt, Secret Service stuff, there's been a lot going on. It's been a busy weeks. And again, it's been so busy that's why we are a little bit behind in this ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. Be a part of it right now. We got a 1-minute break coming up. 2-minute break, actually. Go this 2 minutes and make a donation. I'd love to see a spike. ACLJ.org.
The latest on the war in the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu traveling to the U.S. for a high-stakes meeting with top leaders before his address to Congress.
As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu departed for a critical meeting with President Biden, he's headed toward a Washington beset by uncertainty.
Netanyahu explained one of his main goals as he heads to Washington.
I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel, and I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East.
Netanyahu's speech comes at a critical time, with fighting in the Israeli-Hamas war raging on for 9 months now, and Joe Biden having dropped out of the presidential race. Netanyahu will look to strengthen U.S. support for the conflict as a ceasefire deal remains on shaky ground.
NBC News now reporting that in addition to meeting with Biden, Netanyahu has requested a meeting with former President Donald Trump. But according to 2 congressional aides, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland will preside over his joint address to Congress rather than Vice President Kamala Harris, who's expected to be campaigning.
He wants to build support for Israel in Congress, reinforce Israeli-U.S. ties. He's also thinking about a domestic audience. So many Israelis are upset with how the war has gone. They're upset about the hostages. I think he wants to demonstrate that he hasn't destroyed U.S.-Israeli relations, as some of his political critics argue.
The rest of the world is also wondering what a Kamala Harris presidency could mean for U.S. foreign policy. It's likely she'll hew to her current boss's positions on most global issues, but on Israel, many observers are expecting her to be at least somewhat more critical of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Jeff Balabon's joining us from Jerusalem. We're going to break down all of what's happening, not only here in the States, as President Biden is about to make his first appearance in walking onto an airplane. First appearance since stepping down and since being diagnosed with COVID. A lot of mystery has been surrounding that whole situation. We know he's going to be addressing the nation tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. That broke just a few minutes ago. But, Jeff, obviously, Israel is going to be a hot topic now heading into a potential, not even potential at this point, a Harris run, not someone who's been the best for Israel in recent months and certainly is often kowtowing to the extreme left. You also had a situation yesterday where people have been thrown out for potential vice presidential candidates like Shapiro. John King said, oh, well, I don't know. I don't know if we need another Jewish person now, on the platform. I mean, not these are those words exactly, because that could be problematic. The anti-Semitism, the subtle anti-Semitism, the high-end anti-Semitism, the clear anti-Semitism has never been stronger. And when you have these moments now where Benjamin Netanyahu, which understandably a lot of people love and a lot of people do not, even in your own country, even in Israel, a lot of people, it's a very split, just like it is here. We'll make sure that's clear. However, when you decide not to meet with world leaders or to really snub them or to boycott, it's really sending a message. And it's certainly not a message, as one of our commenters said, certainly not a message that suggests you want peace.
That's right. I was watching the previous segments, and we're talking about how Harris is to the left, i.e. worse for Israel relations than Biden. Let's also put this in context. Joe Biden is arguably, and it's actually hard to disagree, the worst, the most anti-Israel president that's ever been so far. So we're talking about Harris being even worse than a president who has created what they call daylight or sunlight between Israel and America and hampered Israel while it's trying to wage an existential war to defend itself, while it's trying to get back its hostages, including a number of American hostages that Biden is doing nothing to help and doing everything to hamper. And we're talking about a potential candidate potential leader of the Democrat Party who's even worse than that. And as you say, we're talking about openly saying the quiet part, which is, and maybe a Jew on the ticket's not a good thing because maybe Democrats won't vote for a Jew. We have moved well into the region of anti-Semitism, and Bibi, from really during the Obama-Biden administration, that was their ploy. Everything they didn't like about Israel, because they were also not friendly to Israel, they said, oh, no, it's not Israel we don't like. It's Benjamin Netanyahu. They tried to personalize it about him. Of course, we're pro-Israel, because at that point, America hadn't spiraled down yet. The politics on the left hadn't spiraled down yet where you could be openly anti-Semitic. It was, no, we're not against Israel. We're not against the Jewish people. We're against this guy. Well, it turns out that last week, a solid majority representing about 80 members of Knesset, because not everyone was able to vote, voted on language that said that a Palestinian state is an existential threat, right, against everything that Biden and the Democrats have been pushing for, that Blinken's been breaking their backs to do here, saying, no, that is literally an existential threat. It would completely destabilize the Middle East and would also threaten just regional stability and create Islamic jihadism as a global problem. And, of course, reward terror. This is the stance of the vast majority of Israelis, and that's what Bibi is there to represent.
Jeff, we talked about that vote last week a little, and it's not something that got a lot of play in the American press. And I'm very thankful that you are there at ACLJ Jerusalem to follow these things for us, to give us this information. But you also were in Judea yesterday, and you had some meetings with members of Knesset. Could you give us a readout of what you were doing there and the work that you are doing on a daily basis as you represent the ACLJ in Israel?
Sure, and I'm very proud to let the Israelis understand that this is not the Israel Center for Law and Justice. It's the American Center for Law and Justice, and I'm there as an American representing the views and also trying to understand and bring back to America and bring back here the views of what's going on in Israel. So yesterday, there are two different things. Yesterday, I spent the day in Judea, touring around and getting security briefings. And today I spent the afternoon in Knesset. Yesterday's security briefings were fascinating because these are communities in what the world calls the West Bank, but in fact was known for thousands of years as Judea and Samaria. And it's the biblical heartland. And we're in the biblical sites. For example, we were on the hilltop standing where the prophet Amos prophesied, which of course the world says that doesn't belong to them. That doesn't belong to Israel or the Jews. That belongs to the Arabs and the Palestinians who weren't there for thousands of years when the Jews were there. The companies have been using these towns have been using a lot of Arab labor. Well, now, because Biden has funded up Arab terror again through the Palestinian Authority, forget Hamas, it's become impossible. It's a daily threat. And so those Arab workers are out of a job. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for the economy, but they have to protect themselves because they've been radicalized thanks to an America that supports terror. That was yesterday. And obviously there's a lot more of that, but yesterday was touring around and seeing it.
Jeff,
today was at the Knesset. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Continue, please.
Yeah, today was at the Knesset where there was a session which we were invited to, and it was a roundtable discussion, members of Knesset, members of the military, and members of affected communities about the path forward. And it was based on the fact that now Israel, thanks to this vote, is making clear what's been known here in Israel for decades. The other side, the Palestinian side, absolutely has no interest in coexistence or peace. They only want one thing, which is total genocide and a total eradication of the state of Israel and every Jew on earth. And so now that they have voted on this publicly, they're basically making a plea to the world and a plea specifically to America, their greatest friend and ally, and specifically to the kind of audience that's listening to us, Christian America. And that was much of the conversation that supports Israel and supports the Jewish people and is very much against the idea of global jihad, and saying we need to let them understand, and this is what I'm listening to them talk about this, how can we let America understand that we all know there can never be a Palestinian state? It's impossible. And this is what we're talking about, what Americans really want to hear, because there are a lot of people in between who break through the truth with their own stories. This was about the truth between the American people and the people of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I want to take a phone call because this is, I think, not sitting well with people around this country right now, what's going on with Benjamin Netanyahu and his visit. And if you want to give us a call, by the way, we're going to take as many calls as we can in the next segment. This will free up a line. There'll be a couple open, 1-800-684-3110. Let's go to Diane, who's calling in California. Diane, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Diane, and my major concern is that Vice President Harris has had a less than stellar experience the last couple of years relating to international situations, and not seeing Netanyahu today, not welcoming him as world leaders are usually welcomed, is underlining the fact that she's continuing to promote her pattern of failure.
Yeah, and I think, again, with her stance on Israel, it becomes a little clear. You know, Jeff, I actually thought that was interesting that unlike a lot of candidates, if we'd be kind of having to dissect where they stand, in this situation, because Israel has become such a hot topic, specifically on the left, over the last year, we kind of know where they stand, and we know how they're going to do on the issues that ACLJ supporters find near and dear.
That's right. And, you know, Logan, this threat is not just here where I am on the ground in Israel. I have to tell you, the other thing that comes up everywhere I go, I'm talking about people who live in Judea, in Samaria, in what the world thinks of as incredibly hostile territory, dangerous territory. They are so concerned. They're wondering how Jews can continue to live in an America that's being dominated by people like Kamala Harris, by Democrats who are wondering what future there is for America generally under this kind of a leadership. It really is a clarifying moment of good versus evil. And that's the way it's seen here. And I believe that's the way most American Christians see it also. It is a clarifying moment of good versus evil.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us. I did want to encourage everyone to support the work of the ACLJ. We can't have ACLJ Jerusalem without you, without the ACLJ supporter. And during this Life and Liberty Drive, you've heard us continually talk about all the different ways. But right now, we're preparing to file one of the most important briefs ever at the ICC to defend Israel. The ICC just granted our motion, and we only have 2 weeks until our deadline to file. So we are getting very engaged in what's going on, as we always are in Israel. It is never, the fight never stops, but it can't without your support. You have to engage. Look, like I've said, just travel cost alone, it could be enough to not be able to support an organization like this, just to get people where they need to go, whether that's internationally or domestically. You know where that is right now. And really, just think about that. That's a very small portion of what the work of the ACLJ does, is just getting from place to place. But we can't do that without your support. We only have 1 week left in our Life and Liberty Drive for the month of July. Your support is crucial for us to engage in all of our vital legal cases, whether that is our support of Israel, our support of life, and of course, in America, our support of liberty, which never has been more important than right now. We are a little behind. I told you that. I'm always going to be honest with you. We're a little behind. It's been breaking news. Political donations have dominated. That doesn't mean the ACLJ work gets to stop. And we need your support right now. Your donations are doubled. Go to aclj.org or scan that QR code on your screen. Hey, a few lines just opened up. I like to hear from you. You heard from Jeff Balaban. You've heard from Will. You've heard from me. You've heard from people all over the country today. But now I get to hear from you. So 3 lines are open right now. You can fill those with your voice. 1-800-684-3110. President Biden allegedly going to make his first appearance any moment. We'll let you know how that goes. 1-800-684-3110. Get in line right now. Let's take some calls coming up in just a minute.
We just got word that the Secret Service Director, Kim Cheatle, has resigned.
An internal email sent by Kim Cheatle to those in the Secret Service announces her resignation. This a day after that she was really a verbal punching bag on Capitol Hill.
Director Cheatle has tendered her resignation. Of course, that comes one day after she faced a grilling in front of House lawmakers who demanded answers about the security lapses that led to the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th. Of course, they were frustrated when Cheatle really refused to give any sort of detail about what their investigation so far has turned up as far as the U.S. Secret Service's role in those security lapses.
I'm glad she's resigning. I'm glad she's no longer going to be the head of the Secret Service. I wish she had been fired because, I mean, we need to change the culture of that organization. There were so many. This was a catastrophic failure to protect the former president and, quite frankly, also the leading candidate to be the next president. And she had the most abysmal performance that I'd ever seen. And not just my 4 years in Congress, but the most abysmal performance I've ever seen in front of a congressional committee in the 30 years since I've been a nerd watching C-SPAN in my 20s.
During yesterday's hearing, one of the members, the Republican members of the committee, actually offered to give up her time during the hearing to have Director Cheatle write her resignation letter, and she politely declined. And at one point, she did say that she still believed that she was the best person for the job during that hearing. But you're right, a bipartisan letter from Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat, and Republican chairman of the House House Oversight Committee, James Comer, really tipping the balance here. That bipartisan call for her to step down was really, the writing was on the wall after that.
Both Republicans and Democrats come out so quickly and do it in a bipartisan way. They're trying not to make this a political issue, even though politics are involved in the people that are being protected. And it seems as though it just became too much for the director to handle. And at this point, she's made the decision that it's time to step down.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We're going to be taking your calls here in just a moment. Look, I've been looking at YouTube comments. And there is, I don't usually address YouTube comments that are negative or like, there's this whole conversation right now happening of me being some liberal talking, giving liberal talking points or liberal voice, simply because early in the broadcast I said, don't treat Kamala Harris like she's some cartoon character. Treat her like she is a serious a candidate who you're going to have to beat, and you can beat by the record. She has an atrocious record on life, an atrocious record on Israel, and a lot of our top topics. But don't go around thinking that she is some, just goof. If you do that, you are in danger of losing the election. We have seen that happen. You know who's credited a lot of times for Donald Trump winning? Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon is because he tousled his hair and made him into a human being. He's credited a lot for giving people an SNL. Who's credited for George W. Bush winning? Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell's version of George W. Bush, because you took his little quirks and you made them endearing to an American people, which is filled with people who are not perfect, who are filled with non-celebrities, who say weird things and say funny things. But guess what you actually have with a Harris ticket? A record of atrocious rulings, of thoughts, of her time locking people up. That is how you run and you win. If you focus and you make it just a joke, she speaks funny, or maybe you pull off something that is, maybe you think is, lightly racist or sexist, that is not how you're going to win, nor should be, by the way. It's disgusting. But I wanted to clarify that. I saw comments coming in saying that you have heard my thoughts on life for the last 30 years. You've heard my thoughts on Israel, specifically the last couple of years. And you think, because I'm saying take someone seriously, someone who has made their way, by the way, up to being vice president of the United States and has had a long career, to take them seriously? This is not a joke. Also, you have a team of people. Remember, you have a team of people who are going to surround her and make it the best possible version of her. So don't take it lightly. That's all I'm saying. If you run into this thinking you're just going to have a landslide victory, remember, a landslide victory in 2024 could be a couple percentage points. I'm not saying that she's popular. Certainly right now she is not popular. But we got a long time. And be careful.
And if you're concerned about shenanigans from the Democrat Party, you can't only rely on silly videos and clips to try to win an election, because that's falling for a trap that they want you to. They don't want you to be exposing a horrific record on things that conservatives hold dear. They want you to be more concerned about that video where she really liked Venn diagrams, or really loves school buses, or her what your future can be unburdened by what has been. They want you to fixate on that.
Funny. And I'm not saying they're
exactly
not funny.
And they are funny to share.
Yesterday we talked about the national champions, which are the champions of the nation, which are the national champions. Like, yes, I get that stuff is funny. They are quirks. We should discuss them. We should have some fun with them. Absolutely. But that's not necessary to be the only thing you say. Let's take some phone calls. Let's go to Angela, because she's ACLJ champion. She gets up early. Angela, you're on the air in Texas.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I told the phone screener my biggest point was that I think that the Trump campaign needs to focus on accomplishments that they've had and people's records, and not do personal attacks. And I think just as voters in general, we need to look at that also. You don't judge a candidate by their gender or their race. You judge them by, are they the best person for that position?
Right.
And I also told the phone screener that I am a professional that is that used to be a profession that was predominantly male. And now it's not, but it's based on our capabilities, not because we're women or we're a man. It's based on that we can do the job.
Yeah, Angela, I'm glad you agree, and I'm glad that you're on ACLJ Champion. I think you watch it on Rumble, again, a free speech platform, and usually one where the comments get a little bit more wild on Rumble because it is a free speech platform, which we love. But Angela, I think you speak for a lot of people, which is you're looking at this and going, okay, I know who I'm going to vote for, who I'm not going to vote for, not based on race, not based on gender. I'm voting because I agree or disagree with a record, and that is a record or their points of view or what they say they're going to do. And what she's saying she's going to do, and will, by the way, because it's going to get more extreme, is enough. Is enough to not take these. I'm not talking about Donald Trump throwing a nickname. I'm not even sure what nickname he gave her. I'm sure it's not great.
I think it's Lion Harris. That's the one that's being workshopped right now. I've seen it on Truth. So
that at least has
Lion
something
Harris.
to do with policy, so maybe I'm okay with it. I'm not talking about a little nickname. I'm talking about when you think that's the way you win, is by just, or what you're doing is belittling the fact that they can win. And I really think you cannot take things, lightly right now. Chuck is calling in Georgia on line 4, watching on YouTube. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Just a quick note. I'd send my resume in to work for you, but I'm a little too old. So.
Hey, we are not ageist here. You never know. You never know what job opening's happening. And look, I think there is a job listing area on our website. I think you can find whatever active positions there are. So you know what. But go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, but anyway, my question is, it appears to me I have not seen a whole lot of intelligent comments come from Harris, which goes with the theme of qualifications. And I'm wondering, in your opinions, are there people behind her that hope to use her more or less as a puppet to promote their agenda?
Sure. I think that that's always the case. I think that's the case for all presidents, that there are teams of people built around her. And look, I think that you also have to remember she has been dealing with a President Biden administration. And she has had, we haven't really seen, other than in the debates, which you got to give it to our friend and colleague, Tulsi Gabbard, who really destroyed Kamala Harris's run for presidency. We can find that clip for another show. I'm sure next time we have Tulsi on. That she's not great in debates. You're right. She hasn't been good, but she isn't good at policy. But we haven't seen what happens when you have the full Democratic Party behind her, what that looks like. And when she is, let's say, unburdened by
what has been
for President Biden, when she doesn't have that cleanup job to do. I think you probably have a bit of relief from a lot of people in the Biden administration because of that.
And one other note of something that we have actually fought directly against Vice President Harris. We mentioned this yesterday, but when she was the Attorney General of California, she was the one trying to crack down on pregnancy resource centers. Yep. They were trying to force them to display a signage to tell you where to get abortions in pregnancy resource centers, crisis pregnancy centers. And we had to take that on and fight back against Kamala Harris as Attorney General, as she was defending the state wanting to push that. Yeah. So we fought this record. We know where she's been, and that wasn't her being a puppet. That was her being the top law enforcement agent of a state, the largest state in the country.
State. Hey, unfortunately, Earl, we're not going to be able to get to you today, so maybe tell him you can call in tomorrow. We'll get him up earlier in the broadcast. We appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the work of the ACLJ. Thank you for watching and listening today. Hope we gave you a little more information. Hope we inspired. Hopefully you got a lot going on. And right now, I'm going to take this last 30 seconds to tell you to support the work of the ACLJ. Because without that support, we can't keep going. It's the Life and Liberty Drive. It's wrapping up right this week. We need you right now before the end of the month. Make your donations, and all of them will be doubled. Become an ACLJ champion, too. Of course, you get preferential treatment, which is great if you want to call in. That's from me, by the way. I can't say every host will do that, but from me. Scan the QR code. It's on your screen. We really would appreciate it. Again, down because of just the news right now and the dominating of politics. So be a part of something real. Go to aclj.org right now.